My name is Han Kim. I'm a senior solution architect with Augusto, who's a premier partner. And my talk is entitled CP 141, How to Make Enterprise Search More Effective Using Google Cloud Search. I'm going to talk about how we can leverage cloud search abilities to better serve our end users. And the way I'm going to approach this, and you'll see this in the demo, is not necessarily cloud search as a product by itself, standalone, but what cloud search can do if you integrate it with third-party data sources and custom interfaces. So this is going to get a little bit advanced. I'm going to start broadly and introduce the product generically. And as we go, it'll get more and more specific until we get down to the demo, which is some cool stuff in there. I asked that we hold some of the questions till the end because I don't know exactly how long the demo is going to go. So if you wait for me in about 2 slides, I'll have my email up. So you can email me directly and ask me questions that way as well. I may reiterate some points as I go through the demo. And I'm doing this because there's key salient points that we'll have to remember as we get into the slightly more technical aspects of my talk. And if you don't follow what I'm saying on the technical aspects, just wait for the demo and I'll put it in context so you can actually see what I'm talking about. So, 9 months ago, and next 2018, Jayant Mysore and Eli Millois from Lumaps introduced Cloud Search. And it was the first product launch 6 months ago. I think in October, we had the first GA release of the third-party connectors. So in that time, 9 months since product launch, 6 months since the GA of the third-party connectors, what have we done with it? What can we do with it? Let's take a look. All right. So the question here is why cloud search, third-party data sources, and search widgets are so important. And one of the things to recognize is once you start diving into third-party connectors or custom interfaces, we start migrating from the G Suite side of the house, which everyone kind of is familiar with, into the GCP side of the house. So are you guys all, who here is familiar with GCP, the Google Cloud Platform? Everyone? Yes? And also on the G Suite side. I'm sure most of you are all G Suites familiar as well. Great. So when we look at the scope of possibilities on how we can take metadata to enrich the results, helping the UI, helping the end user determine relevance, we have to kind of combine all these elements to make that work. Because the default cloud search interface is something that you're probably familiar with. It looks like Gmail search or Drive search. So we can't really leverage that interface to customize things that we want to pull forth from the background data and present. So once we begin doing the integration between the interface and the third-party data, we have to do the project provisioning in GCP. We have to do the API calls. We have to do the OAuth. It starts to get a little complicated. It's not like really simple out of the box. And so part of this talk will be about how we approach that methodology to get to this custom interface with third-party data sources and why it's important. There are capabilities inside of Cloud Search now that everyone leverages, which is the relevance aspect of it. But the search results, we're not really doing much with except presenting what we've already ingested. And I think that we can do a lot more with that, and I'll show you what that's going to look like in the demo. So a little bit about Augusto. Augusto is a premier partner, and we're a pure play Google partner. So we don't do any other technologies. We don't do AWS. We don't do Azure. We don't do anything except for pure Google. We've been around for a long time. We're probably one of the oldest G Suites partners. I think we are actually, and the earliest G Suites partner. And when App Engine was launched, that would have been, 2011? And it was the first offering in GCP. We began our cloud native development practice. Since then, we've also gone into the infrastructure side as the offerings increased. We won Google's Global Partner of the Year award. And then through our experience, we also won Google's Cloud Support Partner of the Year and the GCP Partner of the Year again. So we've done a lot of work here. And we're one of the few partners that Google trusts to develop services for them. I think that says a lot too. We actually develop products for Google as well. As for me, I'm a 25-year veteran. I go way back in the web, like before web was even something that was taught in college. So a long time. I just look young, right? For the last 6 months, I was stationed in the headquarters of Google at Chicago, and I was trained as a Googler. and I was involved in PSO. So there's a program called Cardinal, where they took Premier partners, embedded them, trained them, put them on projects moving multi-billion-dollar organizations from either hybrid or on-prem environments into GCP. That program then terminated, and I went back to Augusto to bring that methodology, the training, the insight back, and that's what I'm doing now. The reason I'm interested in cloud search is that I'm not really on the G Suite side of our practice, and it's our oldest practice. So for me, like, seeing that it also jumps over to the GCP side of the house was very intriguing. Like what G Suite's things would do that and jump the fence. And the more I dived into it, and the more I researched what it could do, the potential, the more I was interested in pursuing this path. Now, for those who are part of the ecosystem, which contains cloud search, you're going to find the beginning of this to be a little bit repetitive because you've heard this before. But for the people who haven't, because it's a new product now, I want to go over some of the basics before I start introducing some of the higher level concepts that get a little more technical. Okay, so things I'm going to talk about, a brief overview of cloud search. So what is it as a product in the vanilla form? What can it do? Why you should be interested in it? Then I'm going to go into understanding your enterprise search users. So what are their differences? I mean, that's core of what I'm talking about. How do we address different roles, different units, different groups that need different information? It's nice to think, oh, we have one search interface and we can search all these things. But in reality, as we add more and more things to Google Cloud Search, the data may not be as relevant for all the groups who are using it. So how do we segment that data? How do we target the users? What can we do here? Third-party data sources is where I start diving into how we take other data sources and ingest them into Cloud Search. So we're no longer talking about the de facto G Suites now. We're talking about bringing in things from Salesforce, SAP, SharePoint, all the third-party things that enterprises need to make their search more effective for the resources they have internally. And then leveraging a custom search interface. By the time we get to this point in the deck, we're getting into some really intriguing pieces, and this is going to be a foreshadowing of the demo. And this piece is important because most people think of the search widget, which is offered by Google as part of the cloud search, as a little standalone widget that lets you put the same cloud search capabilities in your intranet or place it somewhere. But I see it as something far more, and the demo will illustrate this, because the ability to control the UI on the result set and to analyze and utilize the metadata that we've ingested can lead to something that's pretty cool. At least I think so. Then we go to analyzing and managing enterprise search once it's up and running. Now, once the actual index is created and you crawl the data, how do we actually manage it? And this is a question that I don't think anyone has specifically addressed in terms of tools. And then also, how do we analyze the usage of that search? Now, some of these things are coming. In the future releases, there will be things available that will give you reporting metrics and analytics. But at this point, it's still a pretty new product. So we're waiting on those things to kind of gestate and come out. But I think it still will be a while. But I'll give you some solutions that we're looking at Augusto that allows us to do those things now, today, for our clients. And then lastly, looking beyond text. So, as I said, like in 2018, Jayant Mysore and L.A. Melois, they put together a demo that used Vision API to ingest images into their cloud search. And it was pretty cool. I mean, Ellie said it was pretty simple, but I was thinking, okay, let's evolve that. Where can we go from this point and push that envelope further than what they demoed? I mean, it's only been 9 months, but I think we made some progress. All right, so let's start at the beginning, cloud search. So Google Cloud Search allows employees of company to search and retrieve information such as internal documents, database fields, CRM data, the company's internal repositories. Cloud Search also enables native ingestion of G Suites out of the box. I think everyone kind of lumps G Suites into this one big container. It's G Suites. But if you look really carefully and think about it in the abstract, what you'll see is that each component of G Suites is actually a separate application, right? So we think G Suites, but really we have email, we have calendar, we have notes, we have all these component pieces that are a separate application, and Cloud Search is searching across all of those applications. And I think this is an important point to note, because as we add third-party data sources to this mix, we're enabling a search interface to go across all those applications as well. So architecturally, we're looking at something very intriguing here. We're maybe even increasing or adding the ability to search on things that don't have innate search. And we'll touch on that again a little bit later. So the G Suite's integration, I think, is kind of out of the box, taken for granted, but you can also run cloud search independently without having a G Suite's license or not using G Suite's. But typically speaking, the end case usually is that you have G Suite's and you're using cloud search to search across the entire application suite of G Suite's. Let's go here. With cloud search, you get an interface at cloudsearch.google.com that automatically ties into your native offerings at G Suite's. And you can also add third-party data into the same interface. Now, this is important to understand because the cloudsearch.google.com is your one default interface that Google provides to you. That's where you go. You add more data, add more providers, you still go to cloudsearch.google.com. This is why it's important for us to consider this third-party separate interfaces that tie into cloud search in a unique way outside of the de facto offering. So some connectors such as web crawlers, database connectors, CSV connectors, Windows file system connectors, and SharePoint online connections are available as Google gives them out for free, and they're open source, and you can go online, look at the detailed information, and grab them, implement them. Bingo, they work. Other connectors are available from third parties who've developed them and have even wrapped services around them. So those connectors are a little more complicated because typically they tie into SaaS-based applications that may require a little bit more analysis. I mean, if you look at an application like Salesforce, you can't really just say, let's ingest Salesforce and search it. You have to understand what you're looking for and what the case scenarios you are for the search for Salesforce. Interesting happens when you actually implement that third-party data source. One, they'll pop up in the default interface. So at first you'll see Gmail, calendars, etc. listed on the side. And then now you'll see your third-party interfaces kind of jumping out saying Salesforce or whatever you name them at the time. But with third-party data sources and custom interfaces, you can limit which data sources are available to which interfaces. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. The first clue in terms of the architecture of the way Google was thinking about rolling out cloud search is already given now, because once you start going third party, once you start going custom interface, you're in GCP now, okay? That architectural clue is an important one to understand. So just make note of it now, and I'll readdress it in a little bit later in the talk. Okay, the GSA was the precursor to cloud search. And who here is familiar with the GSA or the Google Search Appliance? I bet a lot of you are, right? So this was deprecated in favor of cloud search to enable less management of hardware and a greater flexibility with the APIs that they've created. And if you remember what the GSA was, it was your own rack-mounted piece of hardware, and you added more of them to scale with more documentation. So you're actually managing sort of a server stack or a hardware server stack, which is not really a googly thing to do. So they got rid of it and said, let's go in and build a cloud-based, cloud-native interface that allows us to do the same thing at greater scale with an evolving ML AI model that we can then implement more universally. So, but in essence, if we think back to the architectural view inside, the GSA, the philosophy of the GSA and the philosophy of cloud search are the same. You know, they both allowed scale. They both have a methodology to get you more documents, more indexing, but one just removes the overhead of actually trying to manage hardware, okay? So that's where we are now. So, as I said before, once you move beyond third-party, default interfaces, default data sources, we're starting to move into the area of GCP. So like the old GSA, which also allowed you to add third-party data sources to it, you know, we can now do that in cloud search also. But with that, we have APIs that allow you to extend the capabilities and fully manage that index remotely. So now, just like regular Google search that we do for the web, we have the ability to interface with our index through an API, through the custom interfaces, into our third-party data sources. So in terms of additional data sources, something to consider is that by adding multiple third-party data sources, you're going to confuse the mix on that single interface at cloudsearch.google.com. HR doesn't want to see IT-based things. Tech support doesn't want to see medical records, right? You have to begin to segment those things. How do you do it? You can't really do it at cloudsearch.google.com, so you need to use their widget to build the basis of these interfaces that can do that. So this is in contrast with G Suites when used organizationally, because G Suites is not really a business-specific solution like a SaaS-based application would be. So the third-party data sources are often more targeted. They often have a more specific or narrow target in your organization than G Suite, which is a broad-ranging and wide-scoping application suite. So obviously, the more third-party data that you ingest, the more scale becomes critical. So if you're talking about something like a typical implementation of Salesforce, a medium-sized business can have 200 to 500 million records, okay? If you're using Cloud Search as the front end for that search, you gotta have some scale. Larger companies, tens of millions, 20 million, 100 million, 500 million records, okay? So when third-party data sources are enabled, there are logical groupings inside the interface that you get that you don't get out of the box if you just use the default offering. These search applications inside of them house all the data sources, the default ones and the third-party ones, and you can turn them on and off. The cool part is you can assign this logical grouping called search application to these custom interfaces. So if you turn off all sources except Salesforce, embed that connection into a custom interface, make that custom interface your sales interface, now you have that logical segmentation that we were talking about. So now we get to something more interesting, more productivity, more effectivity, because we're placing the search in context with the places that these salespeople, IT people, HR people know where they are, and they can use them without looking for sources that are not related to their position or their role. So, sorry. Okay. So Cloud Search scales with your business as your data sources and search interfaces increase in number. This is a duh statement. Everyone's kind of like, yeah, obviously. But this is a really critical thing to understand because, as I said, when you ingest third-party data sources, you can get to a pretty large scale really, really quickly. And if we're talking enterprise, I mean, we're not talking about one SaaS-based application or one database. We're talking about multiple elements. Some of the pieces of the demo that I'll illustrate are ingesting images, ingesting video, things that are more content-centric and less application-centric. But nonetheless, typically speaking, you're not gonna just implement like 5,000 photos. You're gonna have plenty of images, you have plenty of documents, plenty of database records. So the scalability is really important because A, you don't have to manage it any longer. You just have to ingest it and use it based on your license. And B, it does other things that allow you to use the scale to return the relevance quickly, return the results quickly, that would be more difficult with a hardware on-prem solution. All right, let's talk about the users, because we're gonna talk about how we segment these search interfaces based on how the users are, right? So we all know that from previous talks, 20% of time is taken searching for relevant information, 38% of time is wasted recreating information. Fine. We know that all workers should be considered knowledge workers or have a thread of knowledge worker running through them. Well, this is where it comes down to it, right? The search interfaces for the knowledge workers that we should be considering everyone as a knowledge worker actually can segment the right data for the right people in the right roles. A single search interface, nice capability, but the reality is we need to segment. Why do we need to segment? Well, we don't want to force people to wade through non-relevant data. I mean, the search interface there is for relevance, right? So why are we presenting search results that have nothing to do with their position? You know, that's not even a reasonable proposition, really. It may work in general terms, like in a web search, but for specific job-based things, not so much. Location of the search interface is critical because we all go to certain places inside of our organization that revolve around our role. So embedding that embeddable search widget in the proper area gives context to its function. We can brand it. We can change the UI to actually indicate what its function and purpose is. And those things are critical also because usability happens when you engage the user knows what the results will be, and can instantly be confident that what you're returning relates to what they're searching for. So think about separations of duty within an organization. I mean, that right there, that concept right there is a great segue into why we would do this with separate interfaces different data sources in each of them. So different search applications with different data sources allow for role-specific search that makes finding the proper information easier. And a universal single interface for all data sources can and should still exist, just in case you don't know exactly what you're looking for and you want to search across everything. But reality for day-to-day, it's not as useful. All right, this is like eye chart material, so you don't have to read all this. I'll go over this with you. I'll read it for you. How about that? So HR data sources. HR data sources are kind of a primary destination for most employees at one point or another. And if you look at the data metrics, like it's a highly sought after area. So that one might be a little bit more genericized, but still, like as we get down to sales data sources, sales personnel are concerned with primarily pipeline opportunities. And when most often search data sources like Salesforce, SAP, Oracle KA, etc., marketing data sources may overlap with sales data sources, but they also probably contain other things like marketing resources, images, brand, logos, etc. And if we do the marketing piece of this correctly, we can actually transform the way we can access those resources, especially if they're content-based sources like images, etc. And then IT data sources, which is not what everyone thinks about when it comes to search, but we can hook up with Confluence, we can hook up with Git and GitLab, we can hook up with ServiceNow and Jira, we can look at project tracking information, we can look at code base. And this is another interesting thing, if you ingest your Git projects and you ingest more than one, it's really interesting because as you search, you can look for commonalities in your code base. So now it becomes a tool that transcends just finding documentation into something that lets you analyze what you have. Now we're getting into the gist of it. Now it's starting to get interesting in the third-party data sources. Okay, so here's some popular ones that we all know and we all use at the enterprise level. So third-party data source connectors offer the tools to allow a huge host of external data elements, SaaS applications, etc., to be ingested into Cloud Search. We can crawl public clouds, on-prem files, intranets, websites, SaaS applications, etc. RSS feeds are an interesting one. CSV files are an interesting one, and structured or unstructured data. Some of the largest SaaS applications I'm putting up here for you to look at, but there's more than this that are available. Augusto is working with Google on third-party data source integration and has created its own third-party connectors in some intriguing and interesting ways. We've actually built an ingester that's a pure client-side JavaScript crawler, And you wouldn't think that would be possible, but the API allows that to happen. So remember the slide about the cloud search scales, etc.? Well, in the context of the complexity and the size of these SaaS-based applications, it's a necessity for us to be able to house enormous amounts of data in the index. Critical thing to remember. The search capabilities with each of these applications work well. So if you go into Salesforce, well, it's arguable, right? You go into Salesforce, you go into SAP, you go into your SharePoint, they have innate search built into them. But as I said before, unlike G Suites, you can't really go into Salesforce and search across SAP, SharePoint, your files, etc. Cloud Search lets you go across all those different sources and return relevance throughout all those different types of data. So my good friends Rachel from Dusseldorf, who are third-party data source integrators and also build their own connectors, graciously helped me get my Salesforce data into the demo. We don't actually do the Salesforce integration piece of it. And as part of that process, they asked me a bunch of intriguing questions because they kind of said like, well, you just can't dump all of it in there, right? Like, what do you need? Like, what specific business cases? In my case, it was a demo. So I need specific demo elements, right? And so after having that discussion, you realize that complex third-party data source integrators require services to be wrapped around the connectors. You could try doing it yourself, but you'd have to understand a great deal of technical knowledge about the specific SaaS application in order to actually execute it properly. I mean, it's gonna be a lot of trial and error, and these guys have a bit of experience doing that. This diagram kind of outlines the different types of connectors that Rachel offers, and they probably offer more than this, but for sure Salesforce, Confluence, Jira, and SharePoint Online. Now what you're seeing in the middle is the default data sources that come sort of with the default G Suite's Cloud Search interface. And then on this side, the search interfaces that we can build from that, including the default one at cloudsearch.google.com and other ones that we may add on to the mix. The default search application in that grouping is cloudsearch.google.com. It's not a great name. It just is default. It's kind of unpretentious. But when you go in to add different new search interfaces, they have kind of long names that you have to ID and strings that you have to understand. And this is when the GCP complexity starts to ebb into the mix. Okay? By assigning search applications to specific search interfaces, you create logical segregation, as I said before, per data sources, per user group, per context of where you place them. So remember the term search application. So in this case, it's sort of like the application of search. Where, how, what does it do? Now we get into the more interesting piece. Custom search interfaces. Now it's starting to come together now, right? And yes, that is my car. Google Search Widget is the baseline custom search interface. So it's just a bundle of JavaScript and code with some instructions on how to interface it with the APIs to give you a cloud search-like experience in a widget you can place anywhere. The core of our demo actually is the cloud search widget, but the cloud search widget is really basic. It's a template. It's not something you're supposed to use in production necessarily. You want to extend its capabilities, and that's what we did. So it's not just about cosmetic overlays, although that is important too for the UX experience, etc. But custom interfaces can extend the default capabilities. And I don't think I've seen anyone really working with this, except for maybe in the overall CSS-based layout that makes it kind of streamlined. I'm talking about individual search result customization. I'm talking about surfacing metadata per result type, so you can make a quicker determination if that one result is the thing that you're looking for or not, without having to ingest all kinds of cognitive layers of reading text and then discerning, through that cognitive process, is this what I want or not? So you can make it look pretty too, and the marketing guys love that. In fact, the demo that we developed has a bit of that in there because they want to see a branded experience with the humanistic elements of it. How can we make this more interesting and more compelling? And we've done that as well. So when you go into third-party data sources, you go to GCP. When you go to custom interfaces, you go to GCP. So what is a part of GCP that is required for those two things? It's the project, the API enablement to allow you access from outside of Google to access the resources of Cloud Search, and then project associations with credentials, and then also with your OAuth logins and all the security aspects that we need to also integrate so that other people can't use our Cloud Search, because some of the third-party things that we're dealing with are based on license of number of queries that you're doing a month. All right, so in a generic term, if we look at these kind of colored rectangle blocks, if we say that each of these is a custom search interface and they reside in places that are logical for the end users to find them, places that they go to every day to kind of do their daily thing, we can see that HR might have, the intranet information, Facebook Workplace, HR, etc. Sales has Salesforce and SAP. IT has GitHub, ServiceNow, and Jira. So conceptually, this is kind of easy to understand, and I think everyone here understands why it makes sense to start segmenting the more third-party data sources you bring in. So in this way, search applications represent a group of users, and those users are different, so the customizations can be different. We'll see more of that in the demo as we go through. All right, so let's look at this case example. We're using the same index, the same ingested data. This bottom one is the third-party interface, the custom interface using third-party data, and the top is the default cloud search. Now, because it's default cloudsearch.google.com, you can't really change what it's doing. You can't recode it. You can't make it do something that it's not doing. So it's sort of at the mercy of the crawlers, right? So you think to yourself, well, we can fix this with the crawler. Sure you can. But now you have another layer you have to go into in terms of customizing someone else's code or open source code to get the end result. So now you're playing with, look for the interface, ingest it, is it what I want, etc. Meanwhile, with a custom interface, it's super easy to go into the metadata and say, okay, this thing's returning untitled. Why? What is it? Well, it's a URL. Well, what's at the end of the URL? Is it an HTML file, a PHP file? Is it a text file? If so, let's look at that extension, analyze the type of content it is, pull that file name, and return it, because it gives more context. More context than untitled, certainly, but it might not be too descriptive, like cybleary.txt really isn't that definitive, but it does give a better experience than saying untitled on the crawl. So there are now things that you can't do by adjusting the crawler. So the crawler example is one thing. So you're no longer at the mercy of the crawler because you can use the metadata in different and creative ways. But there are things that you can't do by adjusting the crawler, such as taking the metadata and surfacing them in the results and doing things like showing color instead of describing color. So you can say, let's say with the Vision API example that's in the demo, yeah, this color orange is present, brown is present, but now you have to read that and then discern it in your mind. What kind of brown, what kind of orange? Here's the hex code that doesn't make sense. Let's actually display the actual color so we can see it immediately and say, oh yeah, that's what I'm looking for. That's what actually I was searching for, right? So surfacing that metadata and putting it into the results so that what's displayed as you search is something you can't do by adjusting the crawler. Another thing is that users need confidence to say that the thing I'm searching for is what I found. And by putting more metadata forward in ways that, like Edward Tufte of Yale would say, like, how do we visualize the data? Well, we can do a great deal, and I think our demo does a good job of showing you how we've accomplished that. All right, so this is one example. Now, this is a search result at the top. I'm searching actually our public website. And this is the preview, and we'll see this in the demo as well, of the website page that it crawled. And now the GSA in later versions of this was able to do previews, to make sure this is the document I was looking for. The difference is this also has inline context highlighting. So the search term that you searched for will be highlighted, and I'll show you that in the demo, in context of the preview, which is pretty cool. And plus you don't get dinged for a second query because this data is actually being pulled directly from the source it's pointing to and not necessarily from the index. But the metadata is coming from the index, right? So often the snippets that are returned, which I know is going to increase in length, don't give you enough information to actually make a determination if it's what you're looking for. You click on the thing, it opens a page, you're like, oh, no, you close it, you go back to search, you scroll down. I mean, that's a lot of steps right there, right? Can we narrow that down and make it more usable by not allowing that many actions and disparate things to happen while you're in the search mode? And the answer is you can, yes. So remember when I said the term search application, meaning how and where we apply search? Well, there's also search application or applications that leverage search. And now, perhaps even a meta application, because now the search interface is actually doing something. It's not returning passive data. It's returning some interesting exploratory data that validates the results of the search. So I validated this yesterday because I went to the Cloud Search event and I was invited there and I talked to a bunch of engineers because I wanted some definitive information. So how big can an index item be? Well, it turns out it can have 10,000 attributes per record. And each of those attributes can be 2K long. Okay, now I'm not saying that you can have 10,000 2K strings as part of your metadata because there is a file size limit, but we're talking about a lot of metadata that can be in the index. So an interesting way of thinking about this is why couldn't the search results be the end? Like, why does it link to a document or a file? Why are we ingesting? Why can't we make the cloud search result the endpoint where we get our information and say, yeah, that's it. I'm done. I got what I need. I'm out. It can. And that's the cool thing about it, especially when you use custom interfaces and especially when you start manipulating third-party data, as we'll see in the demo. So, all right. There you go. Facets and metrics. So by going into a custom search interface, you're not really losing any of the functionality. In fact, all we're really doing is extending the capability of what's already available on cloudsearch.google.com. So don't feel like, oh, I'm going to go and do this thing with a search widget and I'm going to get less functionality. In fact, it's opposite. You can do so much with just the JavaScript end of the interface and the API. It's actually quite astonishing. Like I said, we created our own data crawler on client-side JavaScript. In fact, the whole demo, everything I'm going to be showing you is 90K of total code and almost no backend at all. There's one PHP script, I'll have to admit, but everything else is client-side. It's that light. So the API structures that are available to you allow you to build complex meta applications with very little input and overhead. So custom faceting is also something that we can do with a custom interface. So in this case, it's not custom, but you can see lexically speaking, open by might be better be parsed as opened by, or the person who opened, etc. And we can store those lexical definitions inside of the metadata of the record, pull them out and display them in human readable terms. Likewise, let's say some of our facets are colors. I always come back to colors. Well, visual things can be displayed in a visual manner. So instead of showing the hex code and saying, let's segregate by orange or whatever, we can actually show the color and use that color as a faceting metric. All right, analyzing and managing search. So, we have a search interface, cloudsearch.google.com. Reporting is coming for sure. It's in the works, and we're gonna have some great interfaces down the line that let us do a query analysis, knowledge gap analysis, and all those things. But right now, for people who need it today or yesterday, what can we do? Like, how can we do more analysis on our search? And then also, how do we manage it? These are the two questions we have to ask. So one, full GUI index management, again with JavaScript, with a super light client, completely possible. We can do it today. In fact, we can edit, delete, update, crawl, all from front-end UI. And that's, I think, quite remarkable. So here we just have like an example, like what's above is actually the result record. And because I'm an admin and I have the auth, I'm signed in, on top, Hansoo Kim, I can also delete this. I can show the metadata of the index item saying it's raw content, the status, the language, the MIME type, the ACLs, and access. So if I deleted this item and I searched for it and yielded one result and deleted it, that same search will result in 0. So index management at this layer is completely possible today, right now. Then, because it's a custom search interface, guess what? I threw Google Analytics at it. So this is super cool too, right? What am I measuring here? Well, I did a very simple data model, like super simple. I said, what are people searching for? What are the results? What happens when no results are actually given to you? Now, how do we map it? What is the user behavior? What is the path through search that these people are following? All that's in analytics now. So out of the box with a custom interface, if you look at the feature sets that you gain by using them, you can see why there's actually a benefit correlation to going custom versus stock. It's pretty dope. I like it. So here you can see like the different things I was searching for, what event they are, lists, search, click. I can even understand UI customization, what theme, how many returns, etc. Or how many content items do I want to be returned on the page? And then, of course, the last thing is searching beyond text. So text is great. We're seeing all these new products coming out. We're seeing ML wrapped around video, ML wrapped around images like text, text to speech, etc. Dialogue flow for chatbot integration and other things that are on the cusp. Well, all those things are just guided search. And since we have the API that enables us to pull things from the query API, we can integrate that into literally anything. Again, more meta information, more meta applications. Okay. So in 2018, I said JF Mysore and Ali Mewa built the demo that ingested vision images that went through the vision API, pulled metadata, and ingested it. We did the same thing, but we wanted to push it a little bit further because our main topical area wasn't like, you can use all these great products to index that item, but what can we surface in the UI to make it more usable for our enterprise customers? So we took a bunch of random royalty-free images, ran them through the thing, label, thumbnail, image, OCR, and also text detection within them, added them to the metadata, allowing them to be searchable. So I'm gonna run out of time here, so I'm gonna skip ahead one. Let's go to the demo. So in Minnesota, we call this kind of an interface fancy, okay? So this is our fancy interface. And our first client that we dealt with in terms of cloud search was an advertising agency. And they're like, can you give us something more human and more emotional? So this is my favorite picture of my niece. It's a baby picture of my niece. I put that up there to pander to the crowd. The second thing here is a picture of space and then a logo. Now, for all the material guys out there who are cringing, like, oh my God, I'll give you a nice blank background so you can start with something that's more familiar. Here are my data sources. All the stock data sources, just like cloudsearch.google.com, are at the top. Below, each of the third-party data sources is listed with a little 3P moniker, so you can tell they're third party, right? So when we go into, let's say, our public web server, and we search for something like Techne, I have to plug Augusto up here, so we won the Techne award. Not only does the search result return type by iconography, which is a very typical pattern, we all understand that from the old days, right? But when we go into the preview, it will pull the actual website that has that content piece and now allow you full content inside of that site with context highlighting. In this case, I chose a googly blue, right? So inline, our search terms are being highlighted so we can know the thing we were looking for is present. It's a cool thing, right? I mean, we could even chat with Augusto if we really wanted to. I don't think we want to do that right now. Another thing we can do is look at that same file I was saying before about not returning a name. So because of MIME type recognition, end of file recognition, and file type recognition, the parser that we're using to give the preview knows this is a text file. It's not HTML. So it takes the text and actually parses it correctly with its line breaks, again, as you go through with context highlighting. If I could get this interface right. So there you go. Looking for science? You found some science. There you go. Likewise, non-typical text files, which are a ham-based ending, for instance, by MIME type was detected to be text. So we can parse it in the way that the system knows. We went into the Git demo, and to show the faceting still works. So now we're pulling actually the Git page for this piece of code so we can go in and look for the information, the technical information, without leaving search. Know immediately, is this what I want or not? I got the information. This is my endpoint. Boom, I'm done. We're good to go. Salesforce. Let's do some Salesforce data. And I'll pull up Carpenter because they have a cool website. So if we pull up Carpenter, I marked Salesforce data with a SF icon, but inside of the object metadata, we can tell what type of object it is. Is it a contact? Is it an account? There's several different types that we ingested. And thanks to the kind people at Ration, we got a nice little mix. So this one is a contact. All the contacts will pull up and map. And because of HTML5, I can actually have this entire site context asking for my location, and also track directions from Gmaps embedded. So if you're on your phone and you're pulling up a contact in Salesforce, boom, how do you get there? It's already running. It's already working. You don't have to requery it. Now below, this is an account. So this kind of text-based output is kind of cool, but what's more cool is if we can give that thing, oh, sorry, this is the website. I'm ahead of myself. So this is the website for the account. You know, same thing as we've seen before in preview. And here's an opportunity. So by formatting the data this way, versus like reading it as a bunch of lines on the screen, we have colorization, we have spacing, parsing, elements of design that let me go, oh, okay, this is exactly what I wanted. I can see we closed it, no, we want it, no, open activity, we can color code it, we can do all kinds of things to make you ingest what this content means quicker. Okay, Vision API, the thing everyone's looking for. So this has been done before. I'm just going to pull all the content items. This is the way our Vision API data is presented at the result layer. So not only do we have the thumbnail, the name, the labels that the Vision API kind of pulled for us, but this is the color spectrum of the major colors that are present inside of the image. And the bar graph is the relationship between what's called a score, which is the most relevant colors for the central focus of the image that the ML believes is the central focus. Then the percentages is how many percent of the total pixels are this color, and here are the top results. Furthermore, because we are, again, talking about making it more useful and pulling in metadata, this is a sign that says love is like a bottle of gin, but a bottle of gin is not like love. We can actually see through a metadata layer the words that were found and where they're located in the image. And this is not like an overlay. This is a canvas element, an HTML5 canvas element that's overlaying this image that will scale with the image, drawing vectored lines that give you the isolation of where these things are. Now, if you go a little bit deeper into this and say, what else can we do? If I had time, I'd pull video because if we take every frame of video and analyze it through vision, we can see things such as like, well, is there violence in this image? You know, if so, in this surveillance montage of different images, mark that index. You know, this is like, you know, frame number 42, frame number 58. Then in the preview, when we pull the preview of the video inside of the result layer, we overlay once again one of these canvas elements. It'll take you to the index where it detected this violence and outline all the object detection you need. This can be done purely in JavaScript. This is the crazy part of it. Maybe not the vision analysis piece, but the overlay, the indexing, the analysis. I mean, it's pretty amazing, I think. Now, if we go to all data sources and start messing around with everything and pull something random up, well, okay, fine, this is good. And we look at the data sources, you can see that it does have metrics. So we only get metrics for the third-party stuff, but here are the metrics in all the different connectors that I have. So you can see, like, this is pretty robust. There's concepts here that we can use to bring forth a user experience that's far greater than what's currently available in de facto form. So I only have a few minutes left, so I'm gonna wrap this up. And if you guys have any questions, step up to the mic and you can ask me, or afterwards we can step down and you can come talk to me directly. But why don't we flip back to the slides for a second. And then we'll go to the thank you. That's my email, if you guys want it.